Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast. I'm Joshua.
I'm Kim. Let's dive in. Hey, everybody. Welcome back.
Welcome.
It's a cold one today.
Yeah, the day we were recording this, it's very cold, very snowy, very winter today.
Very winter. Winter in Kansas can look like a lot of different things. It can look like summer. It can look like spring, but it can also look like one giant sheet of ice covering the whole state.
Yeah, that's true. When Bree moved to Kansas when we got married, she was like, I kind of thought winter here was just going to be like constant cold and snow. But she's like, actually, most of the time it's pretty normal. And then you have like a week of like these bursts of cold or a couple days of snow, and then it's back to 50s. And like, yeah, it's pretty unpredictable. Like it has such a wide range. But today is very cold, very snowy,
Very icy.
and very icy. Yeah. In fact, we were supposed to be meeting together today to talk about like planning for season 3 and some stuff, and decided it's probably better to stay home and not go drive, which is good because then I opened Facebook while we were planning this and see like truck accidents and all sorts of stuff going on. So I think we made a good decision.
Crazy stuff, man.
So instead, we're going to record an episode and talk to you guys, the listeners, about I just started a new book, and Kim's like, what do you want to talk about? And I'm like, well, I just started this new book and I think it's really interesting, so let's talk about this new book.
Let's talk about it.
And I'm not very far in, so I'm not gonna be able to like give a thorough recommendation or anything for the book. It's just simply like I've read the first couple chapters and I'm like, hey, this is something that's fun to talk about. So the book's called Family Fortunes. It's written by a father and son, Will and Bill Bonner. And they just sort of started looking into what separates people who are wealthy from people who aren't, and what separates generational lines that are wealthy from ones that aren't. And so one of the things they looked at was like some demographics in like Detroit, where there used to be a lot of industry and now there's a ton of homelessness, there's a ton of poverty and all sorts of things. But there's still a couple neighborhoods that are affluent and the houses are nice, and so you go and talk to some of those people and their families have lived there for 50 years. And so they just sort of like stood out to them as like, there's something that differentiates one from the other. And so have you ever heard of the marshmallow test that they do with kids sometimes?
Mm-hmm.
Like where you put a marshmallow in front of a kid and you say, hey, if you wait 15 minutes, I'll give you more marshmallows. Or you can have this single one now. And you watch kids, and like the majority of kids struggle with this. The majority of kids are like, I want the one marshmallow that's right in front of me because that's what I see and that's what's available. But there are some kids who will wait, and they learn that being able to delay gratification was one of the biggest indicators of wealth within a person. And so they took that and did some more research and found another study that almost perfectly predicted whether or not a person was going to be wealthy or not. And that was giving $1 to a high school student and telling them if they waited a week, they'd give them $2. And that was almost a, like they had almost a perfect success rate of determining whether or not the person was going to be successful or not.
So
And
they
I
couldn't
thought
spend the dollar or what?
Um, I think it was I'll give you $1 now, or I'll give you $2 in a week. Um, and so same thing as a marshmallow, but doing it with high school age kids was a
Mhm.
better predictor, because when you're a kid, I think, well, and this, I think this is part of the book. Some of this is learned. It's not just all genetics. And so if you can learn, oh, if I wait for something, something better will happen, then often you will make decisions that set you up better financially for, 20 years from now, instead of, well, I want this tomorrow. Like that was a big indicator. And I think that's really interesting. But what I thought was interesting was when I was listening to the dollar, $2 one, I was like, oh, which one would I pick? Because, and the first thought that went through my mind was, well, I might just take the dollar, because $1 or $2 is kind of negligible. Like, it's not really going to make a difference.
Mhm.
But then I was like, well, what would I like? Would I really do that? And because then I thought, well, it is negligible. It doesn't matter. So why not wait for the two?
Mhm.
And so it's just kind of interesting. I was curious, like when I said that, like what was your gut? Like what do you think you would do?
My gut would be to wait for the $2. But I've always been a delayed gratification kind of person. I know it
Yeah.
sounds really crazy, but it is kind of like, I remember as a kid, like getting birthday money or something like that. And I would save it for so long because I wanted to accumulate it before I spent it. And I was
Yeah.
just very protective of that. And then I had like my sister who would like, she would go get some soda, she would get some candy, and she would go do the things. And I'm like, I'm not touching mine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think my natural bent is that way. I would love to say I see wealth in my life in a big way,
Yeah.
but maybe it's coming.
I mean, maybe. I think it's like I don't think that has everything to do with it, but I think it does. Like you'll pick jobs that are different. You'll spend differently. Like there's all sorts of things that they listed out. Like most people who have generational wealth develop really close relationships with lawyers and accountants, because
Hmm,
those people are necessary in helping them hold their wealth for a long period of time.
sure. That makes
And so
sense.
it's just like it was really interesting to think about. But I kind of knew that you were going to say you were delayed gratification, because I remember talking about like the difference between when you get like a box of chocolates and you
I
like
was going to use that
savor them.
example.
Yeah. I remember like having that conversation, and I was like I remembered that story, and I was like, Kim is definitely a delayed person, because she likes to savor the candy for as long as she can.
I do. But, and it's something, I don't know what it is. I don't know that that was learned. I don't think it was because again, my sister's different
Mm-hmm.
and she doesn't operate the same way. And we grew up in the same household, shared a bedroom, like, you know,
Yeah.
but I think that's just something that's in me. But I also find myself trying to teach that to my kids.
Is it working?
Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I don't force anything on them, but like my 7-year old, she'll get like birthday money or Christmas money or something. And she is really good at saving when she saves, but when she's ready to spend it, she spends it, man. And there are times when I talk to her, like if she carries her money around with her, she'll spend it.
Mm.
If she puts it in her safe place that she has in our house, she'll know it's there and she keeps a tally of it, which is also kind of funny. But she won't spend it until she's decided on something she wants to like. She'll she'll keep an eye on things. She had this little pizza set It's like a pizzeria set. But she'd been eyeballing it for like 9 months. And
Mm,
finally, she took the money that she had had all along and decided it was time to go buy it. But it's not always like that. A lot of
yeah.
times it's like, no, I'm gonna spend this $5 on the candy. I know I could save it for the pizza, but I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I think there needs to be some form of balance.
Mm-hmm.
But also, it kind of depends what life you want. Like, I remember I read this like short story of there was a fisherman on, some small island and, nice weather, and he would, go to the beach in the morning and had on shorts and a t-shirt and would fish, and he caught the fish that he needed for the day. And then he'd go home and he'd spend time with his wife. And one day he was there, and this guy dressed really nicely comes up to him and goes, "I see you come here every day, like, you always catch fish. How come you don't like get a boat so you can catch more fish?" And he goes, "Well, what would I do with more fish?" He goes, "Well, you could sell them, and then you could hire people to fish for you, and then you could get more boats, and then you could hire more people, and and he goes, "Well, what would be the point of doing that?" And the guy goes, "Well, then you accumulate wealth and you get a bigger house, and and then you get, these things, and then one day, you once the business is really large, you sell it and you retire, and then you can spend time with your wife and your kids." And he goes, "But I do that now." And it, like, I just remember hearing that and being like that is a mentality that you can choose to take, that I think is perfectly valid. Like, that person valued time with the people around him, and he didn't need the bigger house, the better car, the nicer clothes, the more boats. Like, he already had the things he wanted. And like, I think there is merit to that story, but that kind of leads me into like the next point of the book, where one of the other interesting things that they found was people who live uh, in a easier climate generally are poorer than people who live in a harsher climate. Um,
What?
Generally speaking,
Because they can enjoy the outdoors more?
because they don't have to work as hard for food. So
Oh,
if you live somewhere where it's easy to grow crops, where there's tons of like animals and fruit and what resources, where if you live in a resource rich environment where it's easy to have a crop that provides for the whole time, like, that's people who live in a place like that are generally poorer than people who live in places that are harder. So one of the examples they give is West Virginia and Switzerland, who demographically were settled by fairly similar European descent people. Um, but one of them is a very harsh, cold climate, and one of them is a very resource rich client place. And in West Virginia is one of the poorest states in the United States, and Switzerland is a lot of times regarded as the wealthiest place in the world. And so it was just like interesting, like, if you live in a place like that, you sometimes have to almost starve yourself so that you don't eat your seed grain, so that you have grain to plant for the next harvest. But if you live in a place where it's really easy to have a big harvest, that may not be as much of a concern, and so you don't have to plan for tomorrow. So that's why we still have like hunter gatherer tribes in places in South America and Africa, and probably some island nations, like where they don't have to worry. They've never thought about tomorrow. They don't, it's not a thing. You just live today. And from the perspective of this book, which was gaining wealth, that's a negative. But then there's part of me that's like, man, I know, like, I have heard of many stories of ultra wealthy people going and spending a few weeks with some of those tribes and being like, oh my gosh, I'm so much happier. I don't have all this stress. I don't have all this anxiety. I'm just living life and it's great. And so I do think that there's like, I don't want to say one is better than the other. Like, there's different choices you can make with your life depending on what you want out of your life. And sometimes the having enough food for today and being able to spend time with the people you want to and do the things you want is enough.
I wrote down this question when you were telling the story about the fisherman, but it is still relevant through the rest of what you're talking about as well. And it is, does financial wealth equal comfort?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that it does. Like, I think there's a mindset of people who don't have wealth, financial wealth, like we're talking about financial wealth in this whole episode, right? Who don't carry financial wealth, who think that would bring comfort. That would be the solution to a lot of their problems. But if you look at the fisherman who goes and gathers enough for the day and then spends time with his family and is living a fairly happy life, adding in the stresses of having to manage the future as well as today doesn't necessarily make his life more comfortable. Whereas I also think, I don't know what also I think about that, but that's my question. Like, are those things actually synonymous? And is it actually more comfortable a life to be wealthy?
I remember hearing this fact, and this was maybe 10 years ago, so the number may have changed since, but that money buys happiness up to $75,000 a year. And
what?
Yeah, it was, someone had done some research and found that for like maybe a small family, like a couple and maybe one or two kids, that up to, like, if you made around 70 to 80,000, somewhere in that $75,000 range, that was enough money where you could have a house, you could have a car, you could have a savings account for if an emergency happened, you had some money, you could pay all your bills, and you could go on one vacation a year. You didn't have to worry about where your next meal was going to come from. But if it got if the number started getting like over 100, 120, it added layers of stress to your life about now you're managing that. And are you managing it at the same kind of house that you would have had, or did you get a bigger house which has a bigger payment and bigger responsibilities and some of those things? Or if you had less than that, then there was some pressure put on you of like, okay, like, we have to make different choices when we go out to eat. Maybe we don't go out to eat. If the car needs a repair, maybe we don't take care of it immediately. Like, so there was this level of that. And when I heard that story, it was around that number. It may have changed now, but I think that's like, that stood out to me as being really interesting, because if you're talking just about comfort, like, I think that has something to do with it. Like, can you be comfortable on less? Yeah, probably. But are you going to have times where it's like, and I don't know how we're going to fix the car, or like, those questions probably are going to pop up, and that might add stress to your life. But also having hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, that also adds stress to your life. And so I think, to answer your question, like, to a point, I think money does offer comfort because it offers the ability to take care of some of those things.
Sure. I think about, this is what I was thinking also, was the instant gratification thing.
Mhm.
And then the opposite of the like being able to wait and manage essentially wealth so that it works on down the road.
Mhm.
Even in that regard, I was thinking about a comfortable life versus a planned life. In that, even if, let's say, you're making, like, you're in a comfortable place, you're at the $75,000 mark. I would consider that, like, based on what you were talking about, whatever that marker is for the comfort level, right?
Mhm.
If you need something, you get it, right?
Yeah.
Comfortable. But are you accumulating a surplus over time that will then last for generations?
Mhm.
No, you're
Right.
living right now in the comfort. So this is the instant gratification, right?
Mhm.
Whereas the accumulation of generational wealth has more to do with saving today so that tomorrow is better,
Yeah.
right? And maybe, I mean, I think we've seen all of these lifestyle reality shows. People who are wealthy also spend money.
Mhm.
But those who are managing it, are they thinking about what they have now, or are they thinking about what they will have in the future and what their family will have in the future? And I
Yeah.
think that's the difference. And I don't even know that one is right or wrong. I'll be honest,
Yeah.
right? Like, should you be living your life for the time that you're living?
Yeah,
Probably,
I think I think it's a really good question. Like, but I also think, okay, like, we're kind of weirdo people and we believe that immortality is possible.
right? Right.
And so, like, then that shifts your picture of generational wealth and living for tomorrow. And yeah, I just think it's
Yes.
really interesting.
Big time.
One of the stories in the book is about the family who wrote the book bought a chateau in France. And they were like, oftentimes, if you talk to people who buy these huge properties and houses, they're just known as these huge money drains because they just require so much, especially if they haven't been upkept.
Right.
And so they bought this one. It was relatively cheap and it needed quite a bit of work, but needed a new roof. And it wasn't just like an asphalt shingle roof, it was like a stone roof. And they didn't say how much it cost. They just said it was very, very expensive to replace the roof. But they knew that spending that money would mean their children's children could still live in that house under the same roof. And so they were looking at it 2 generations away and saying, I'm making this investment for 2 generations. And I think that mindset really is something that's probably learned or that you grow with, because that's pretty rare. Like, there's very few people who really make investments based on their children's children or their children's children's children. Like, that is truly a generational mindset.
I think so. And I think it is just what you said. It is a mindset.
Mm-hmm.
But I think about, I don't know, different organizations I've been involved with, like leaving things better than you found them. Like, there's this whole principle, right? Some people are down with it, some people are not down with that.
Yeah.
But it's something that is fairly instilled in me. But I don't know that it's always taught on such a broad scale, the
Mm.
generational thing. And just like at the beginning, you were talking about how these things aren't always genetic. A lot of times these mindsets are learned.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of that holds true with this as well. Like, even the scope of what you're thinking, like what you're earning today, is that for today? Is that for today and tomorrow? Or is that for today and for years to come?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a huge difference there. And if we are going into that more wacky mindset as the world would see it, of not planning for death, only
Mm-hmm.
planning for life, I think, I mean, I think we could talk about both sides of the coin with this as well. Because are we planning so that what we earn today will continue to sustain for years, decades, centuries to come,
Right.
even just for our own lives? Or here's the other side. Are are we relying on, if we are meant to live for and not die, that we will be provided for as we go along?
Mm.
Give us this day our daily bread. Right. I think about the master's books that we reference all the freaking time. Right. The Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East by Baird T. Spalding.
Mm-hmm.
We will do a book club on this, but in some of these books, there are people who are living for more generations than is typical,
Mm-hmm.
but they're also being provided for daily, right? Is there
Mm.
mention? I don't remember. It's been a while since I read it. Is there mention of accumulated wealth in there that you can recall?
Not necessarily that I can recall, but I like they live in houses and they're so I like one story I'm thinking of, I think like a son is living in a house and the parents are there as well. But at some point, like the people who are ever living ones in that book have a choice of where they want to live. Do they want to live in this dimension or in a different dimension? And so some of them choose this dimension because they have kids and they have things that keep them here. And some of them don't have as many ties anymore and so they feel free to move on. And I think that that probably plays into it a little bit. Like if you're building generational wealth, you probably have kids and you're like, man, what's their life going to be like? And maybe your kids are starting to date and you're like, man, they're going to have kids. Like how, like you take on some of that. And so like, there's a part in Proverbs, I think in the Bible, that says houses and wealth come from the parents. And whether or not it's literal houses and wealth or mindsets of that, I think that like I think what you demonstrate to your kids often is what they will take from that, what they will build on from that. And so yeah, I don't know. I mean, as far as the book's concerned, I almost think because they live in houses and villages that that would be a sign of generational wealth, that the parents are there as well. Um, because in like I mean, for a long time, I think houses have been a sign of wealth. Like, first of all, do you have a house? Second, because there's a large population of the earth that doesn't. Do you
Right.
have like a house with more than one bedroom? Do you have whatever it is, like do you have a house that can entertain people? Because in this book they're entertaining these group of explorers and a bunch of other people. It's probably not a small house. Like,
Right.
and so I think to some extent that would point to at least some wealth being accumulated.
Yeah.
Mm.
Interesting. Makes me think. And where's the balance in it? Is there a healthy balance of providing for today while not neglecting the future, but not neglecting today simply to
Yeah.
provide for the future?
I definitely think there has to be, because I understand the mindset of delayed gratification, but I also think that it's it's not always the healthiest. Um, mm, it's not the healthiest if that's the only place you live.
Right.
Because where does it stop? Like if you're just delaying gratification, do you delay it until you die and then you leave your kids this? Well, then what does that instill in them? Like, were you a present parent? Like, did you have relationship with them? Like, I think there is definitely a balance in that I think is necessary.
Sure. I think so too. And I think one of the benefits of learning the balance and being able to display that for your children is to not continue a pattern of like the wide swing of the pendulum. We've talked
Mm,
about this before, right? So like
mm,
if you're super extreme and saving and withholding and suffering for the sake of saving, then chances are either your kids will do exactly the same and hold that way over here, or they'll let it drop and swing all the way to the other side and spend, 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 spend. You know what I mean? Like can't get rid of it fast enough.
mhm.
And being able to find that balance in some way and learn how to live it out in a healthy way. I mean, kind of regardless of your status with wealth. Like if you feel like you're living with not enough, or you feel like you're living with just enough, or you have an overabundance, like how do you hold this in a healthy balance to
Mm,
teach the generations? Because this is also wealth,
mhm.
like teach the generations to come how to also hold this in a healthy way. You know,
Yeah.
I think we've seen a lot. I think about my parents who are boomers. Their parents were in the Great Depression. Um, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and then my kids are growing up in the 2000s, right?
Mhm,
And I think about the difference in what they received as children. And there's a pattern of each generation wanting to give their kids more. But now we're in a generation where we don't necessarily have more to give.
mm,
And so then we're going beyond the means and living in that deficit as though it's abundance, which is also not a healthy way. Because again, the further you pull the pendulum back, the further it has to swing in the opposite
mhm.
direction. And it just is, I think if we could really get a hold of this and find that balance, we could really set our kids up and their generations to come after us, um, to be able to hold this well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great like mindset is the I love the idea of the pendulum. Like we see it in politics, we see it in finances, we see it in our lives and spirituality, like all it applies in everywhere where there's just this you can be way over here, you can be way over here, you can be anywhere in between. And pendulums carry momentum, so they tend to swing. Um, and is the goal always to be in the middle? I don't know.
I don't know
um,
either.
because I think sometimes it's important to have the polarity of both sides of it. Like, I think like the Bible says, the poor you'll always have with you. And so it just makes me think like when I hear that, my mind says there will always be polarity in wealth. Like there will always be someone who's willing to delay the gratification, someone who's willing to work an extra hour, someone who's willing to work a second job. Like there will always be someone who's willing to do something someone else isn't, and that will to some degree, at some level, set them apart.
Right.
Whether or not that's the healthiest thing or not, like whatever. But it's so like yeah, I think the pendulum, the polarity, like I think it's important, but I also think is like when you're talking about generationally, like sometimes it's what they saw from it. Like I have a friend who grew up in a relatively wealthy household who when he got older was like, I don't want anything to do with that lifestyle. And it was just based on the experiences that he had. but he still took some principles that he learned, but he also was like, that level of abundance, I don't want it. I don't see the life in it. And so he swung the other way, but he might not have swung completely the other way because he was still very frugal. He was still very wise with his money. And so like, I think it's just interesting. Like there's so many, there's so many nuances to this, and there's so many nuances to whether or not it's like healthy or not. And I just think, yeah, it's an interesting thing for sure.
Sure. It really makes me want to get really introspective.
Probably
Seriously, and
good.
think
Yeah.
like, what level of wealth could I still be comfortable with?
Mm,
Because I also think if I had billions and billions of dollars, I wouldn't know what to do with it.
mm,
You know what I mean?
that's
Like,
fair.
how many airplanes can you buy? How many Lambos can you drive? How many homes can you actually occupy? At some point, there's nothing left that you can really buy,
Hmm.
you know, that can provide the comfort. And so then what do you do? So I'm also thinking about this, and maybe this is a lack mindset and I don't even know it, but then you decide what is the worthy cause for it to go to, or what is the best way to invest it, or who do you pour into? And that doesn't sound like comfortable.
Yeah.
Is that lack? Can you judge me right now? Is that a lack mindset?
Um, I think it's a real mindset. Like there may be lack in it because, but I also think aside from lottery winners, well, I don't know if this statement's true, but I'm just thinking, okay, as a son of God, God is probably not going to give you billions of dollars unless you know what to do with it because it will destroy you. And so at this point, yeah, I think it's great that you're like, yeah, I don't know, I don't want to, I don't know what to do with it. But could you learn and grow into knowing what to do with it?
Yes.
Sure. And maybe that's where I would say maybe there's a lack mindset is instead of just saying, oh, I don't ever want to have large amounts of money because I don't know what to do with it. You can learn what to do with it.
That's true.
And I think that's really like will set people apart. I think education is a huge part of this because I think of like all the professional athletes who get millions of dollars and a lot of them go bankrupt after they're done playing because they they bought nice houses and cars and huge food bills and bought houses and cars for their family members and um, then all of a sudden they didn't have a consistent income and that went away.
Mhm.
And so I think there is a
It's like growing into it. This is
yeah,
what I think as you're talking about that. Sometimes a windfall is not the best solution
yeah.
because you haven't grown into it. You haven't learned how to, you haven't art started as the planning ahead
Hmm.
and planning for tomorrow. You
Yeah.
got it as a here's what you have today.
Yeah, and I think that same thing applies to like healing. Like sometimes just an instant windfall healing isn't the best thing because you don't know how to take care of your body.
Wow.
And a progressive healing teaches you, like progressive mental health healing teaches you how to manage your mental health. Progressive physical healing teaches you how to manage your physical body. And so I think there is grace in the process that sometimes we don't recognize.
Let's get on this process.
I think we're on the process.
I think we're on the process. I think you're right. This is a good topic, Josh.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I
Yeah.
think I'm 2 chapters into the book. I think we could have a lot more conversations about this.
That's funny. I'll link the book in the notes. I'll also link the life and teachings of the Masters of Far East. Otherwise, I think we're good, right?
I think so.
Let's wrap it up. You guys have a great week. We'll see you next time.
See ya. Thank you for sticking around. Listen for new episodes every Monday and Thursday. Find us on all social media platforms by searching for Market Mystics. Don't forget to follow and subscribe. Visit upperroomcd.com where you can find more information about the hosts, projects, and guests. Go deeper by booking a coaching appointment focused on redefining identity and wealth in your life. See you next time.